Good morning and welcome back to the 10th Annual Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by the Independent Power Producers Association of India and Innovation Watch. With me is Captain Raghu Raman. Welcome to the show, Captain Raman.
Thank you.
Captain Raman, we'd like to know, you are the MD, you're the CEO of Mahindra SSG.
That's right.
What exactly is Mahindra SSG and how does it operate in the Indian context?
Mahindra SSG is a firm that advises corporates and to some extent government organizations in terms of consulting in the areas of risk, which can be internal risk and also risk which affects the homeland security scenario or the internal security scenario.
Great. We'd like to know, given the fact that, for example, even this retreat, there was an advisory out on the television that there are possibly attackers who will be targeting coastal tourist location areas. How do we deal with such an amorphous and a nebulous concept, where you can be struck at any point of time anywhere and yet you need to get on with your event? Or
I think one, we have to understand that in security you're not necessarily talking about preventing the event, and so in any kind of a security investment there are two parts. One part is preventing the event or anticipating the event, and the other is, if the event occurs, how can you have the strongest resilience possible. So if I were a person who was to design an architecture to protect against terrorist attacks, I would invest probably as much, assuming that if an attack happens, what do I do? Do I have enough immediate capability? Do I have, for instance, bulletproof jackets, bulletproof vehicles to extricate key people out of this place? Do I have the capability to send in reinforcements quickly by helicopters into this location, into whichever location that they are seen? So I think once the resilience factor or the ability to deal with a crisis is strengthened, then this anticipative factor of if it hits, what do we do, becomes less important. Because it's not that it's less important, it's just, as you use the word, it's just too all-encompassing. In the last year alone, security agencies have given 271 days as alerts. If you count the airport, you count the local police, count this, count that. So when out of 366 days or 365 days you have about 270 alerts, it's very little that you can do. Alert means just, okay, so we are on alert. So it doesn't really solve the problem. But what really needs to be focused on is how independent organizations and paramilitary or semi-government organizations are building up their resilience. What are the tools that they're buying? What's the technology that they're deploying? Assuming that there will be a strike, how quickly will you respond? And I think that's the key.
Great. The government of India has now gone in for the unique identification card concept, which is now being handed out to Nandan Nilekani from the private sector, who has now been sent on deputation to the government. What sort of output do you see? How can this help us in the overall security management systems?
There are two parts to your question. I think the fact that there needs to be a national identity mechanism which helps identify the citizen of the country, and I'm using the word with a great deal of caution, but to track movement in whatever shape or form it requires an identity, and that just like a passport. So this is like saying that if you want to have some sort of a common identification feature across the nation, it's a first important step to be able to build databases of suspects, to be able to do pattern analysis, to do analytics, and not necessarily just limited to security. It's a wide spectrum application. So the fact that such an identity is required is a no-brainer. I mean, it's been talked about for the last 20 years and nothing has meaningfully happened.
But in that case, how is it going to be different from, say, voter ID cards, PAN cards, and your
You're
census,
right.
in which the census person also comes and takes your
I understand
data?
that. So I think there are 7 or 8 different documents which identify who you are. I mean, it ranges from your school certificate to your birth certificate to PAN card, voter's ID card, passport and ration card, and all of these things. I think what this project should aim to do, and as it's being charted out, to have a one singular ID, which is the sort of master ID from which everything else sort of emanates. And I believe that is the right direction. Like the US has, or many countries have their social security number, which gives a unique identification number from which you have every other element coming out. The second part of your question, which is bringing in the private sector, I think this is truly laudable move. There are great business process reengineering skills that the private sector has been practicing and has truly embodied into its DNA over the last 15-20 years. And if the government is using many of those skills to sort of kickstart the projects or to give it the impetus that is needed, I think it just opens up a talent pool into a much wider spectrum.